This story took place in October 1918 in the Argonne Forest, France, during the final months of the First World War, and it tells the real story of a group of American soldiers who became completely cut off behind enemy lines, and of a small carrier pigeon that became their only chance of survival in a moment where everything else had already failed. At that stage of the war, the Allied forces were pushing forward in what would become one of the final major offensives of World War I. The objective was simple on paper: break through the German defensive lines, force a retreat, and begin the process that would ultimately end the conflict. But the terrain where this offensive unfolded was anything but simple. The Argonne Forest was dense, uneven, and difficult to navigate, filled with natural obstacles that disrupted movement, limited visibility, and made coordination between units extremely fragile. Among the forces advancing through this region was a battalion commanded by Major Charles W. Whittlesey, an officer leading approximately 550 men into territory that had already seen years of heavy fighting. Like many operations during the war, their advance depended not just on their own movement, but on the movement of the units beside them. Everything relied on timing, coordination, and the assumption that no single group would move too far ahead of the others. At first, the plan appeared to be working. Whittlesey's men moved forward, navigating through the forest, pushing deeper into enemy territory with surprising success. Resistance was present, but manageable. Progress was being made. But while they continued to advance, something began to shift around them. The units on their flanks slowed down, encountering heavier resistance, obstacles, and confusion that prevented them from maintaining the same pace. Whittlesey's battalion kept moving, and without realizing it, they moved alone. By the time the situation became clear, it was already too late to correct it. The space behind them, the route they had taken forward, was no longer open. Enemy forces had repositioned, the surrounding area had closed in, and what had been an advancing unit suddenly became an isolated one. They were surrounded. Communication failed almost immediately. Runners sent back through the forest did not return. Signals were lost. Attempts to establish contact with nearby units went unanswered. The battalion was effectively cut off, with no reliable way to inform command of their actual position and no clear path to retreat. At first, there was still hope that the situation would be recognized and corrected from outside, that higher command would notice the lack of communication, that reinforcements would be sent, that the line would adjust. But war does not move quickly enough for hope to be reliable. As the hours passed, the situation began to deteriorate. Supplies became limited, movement became dangerous. Every attempt to push outward was met with resistance. And then, without warning, something began that made everything worse. Artillery fire. At first, the explosion seemed distant, not unusual, not immediately alarming. But as the pattern developed, it became clear that something was wrong. The shells were landing too close, too consistently, too accurately. They were not coming from the enemy. They were coming from their own side. Somewhere beyond the forest, Allied artillery units were firing based on incorrect information. They believed the position occupied by Whittlesey's men was still held by German forces, and without updated coordinates, they continued to fire, reinforcing that mistake with every shell that landed. The realization spread quickly among the soldiers. They were trapped, surrounded, and now being hit by their own artillery. They needed to communicate, and they needed to do it immediately.
At that time, there were no reliable portable radios that could function under those conditions. Communication depended on physical methods, runners, signal flags, or carrier pigeons. And in that moment, only one of those options remained viable: carrier pigeons. The battalion still had a small number of them, trained to return to a specific location carrying messages. They were used regularly throughout the war because of their reliability. But reliability did not mean invulnerability. The first pigeon was prepared and released. It never arrived. The second was sent shortly after. It was shot down. Each attempt carried the same risk. The sky above the forest was being watched. Any movement could be targeted. And as more pigeons were lost, the situation became more urgent, more fragile, more dependent on something that was rapidly disappearing. Eventually, only one pigeon remained. Her name was Cher Ami. She was not unique in her role. She had been trained like many others, conditioned to carry messages and return to her base. She did not understand the situation around her. She did not understand the danger. She did not understand the importance of what was about to happen. But at that moment, none of that mattered, because she was the last option. The message prepared for her was brief and direct. There was no time for detailed explanation, no room for error. It contained their exact position and a simple, urgent request: stop the artillery immediately. The note was secured to her leg, and she was released. As Cher Ami rose above the trees, she entered open air that was already hostile. Gunfire began almost immediately. The first shot struck her, tearing into her body and disrupting her flight path. For a brief moment, her movement faltered. Under normal circumstances, that would have been enough to end the attempt. But she recovered and continued. Seconds later, another shot hit her. This one was more severe. One of her eyes was destroyed instantly. Her ability to navigate was compromised. Balance, depth perception, and orientation were all affected at once. In any normal situation, flight would have ended there. But she did not stop. Wounded, disoriented, and bleeding, she continued forward. Not because she understood what was happening below, not because she knew what depended on her, but because she had been trained to move in one direction, and that direction remained. Behind her, the artillery continued to fall. Below her, men remained trapped with no control over what was happening. Ahead of her, there was only distance, and she continued crossing it. For approximately 25 minutes, Cher Ami flew through an active combat zone. Her body weakened. Her movements became less stable. Every second increased the likelihood that she would not make it. But she did. When she finally reached her destination, she was barely alive. Her chest had been pierced. One eye was gone. One of her legs had been nearly severed, held only by a small portion of tissue. But the message remained attached. It was retrieved immediately, read within seconds, and understood. The response was immediate. The artillery fire was halted and redirected. The coordinates were corrected, and for the first time since the bombardment had begun, the soldiers trapped in the forest were no longer being hit by their own side. Out of the approximately 550 men who had entered that position, around 194 survived. Many of them survived because that message arrived when it did. Cher Ami was treated for her injuries. Her leg could not be saved and was later replaced with a small wooden prosthetic. She survived long enough to be recognized for what she had done and was awarded the Croix de Guerre by the French military. But beyond the recognition, beyond the medal, what remained was the reality of the moment itself. A situation where communication failed, where coordination collapsed, where decisions were being made based on incomplete and incorrect information, and where the outcome depended entirely on something that did not understand any of it. Cher Ami did not know what she carried. She did not know what was happening below her. She did not know what would happen if she failed. But she did not hesitate. She did not turn back. She did not stop. And because she continued, the outcome changed.